The letter reached the Massachusetts Institute of Technology on a bitter January morning in 1897. It was written in the unsteady hand of a mill foreman who apologized several times for his poor writing before explaining why he was writing. He told of the daughter of a colored cleaning woman about 13 years old who had been found late at night inside one of the institute's engineering laboratories. She was standing in front of a blackboard filled with equations the faculty had been unable to solve for 3 weeks. The girl had finished the proof. She had not copied it, had not guessed, and had not stumbled onto the answer by chance. She had worked through 17 steps of advanced calculus and theoretical mechanics that even graduate students could not complete, and she had done it using methods not found in any textbook. The foreman, a practical man named Thomas Hicks, had discovered her at 2 a.m. during his security rounds. Chalk dust covered her dark fingers, and tears ran down her face. When he demanded to know what she was doing, she whispered, "I'm sorry, sir. I'm so sorry. I just needed to fix it. The mathematics was wrong, and it hurt my head to look at it broken like that." Professor Harrison Webb, head of MIT's Applied Mathematics Department, had received hundreds of letters in his 30-year career claiming miracles or impossible discoveries. Most of them he burned without reading beyond the first paragraph. But something about this letter made him stop. Perhaps it was the foreman's clear discomfort with what he was claiming, or perhaps it was the precise details about the equations. Webb knew those equations well. His doctoral students had been struggling with them for weeks, trying to prove a framework for calculating stress in suspension bridge cables under changing wind conditions. The math required deep knowledge of calculus, physics, materials, and engineering principles that took years of university study to understand. The idea that a colored child, assumed to be uneducated and the daughter of a cleaning woman, could solve what his best students could not was ridiculous on the surface. And yet Hicks had copied the girl's work from the board before erasing it, as required by knightly procedure. The solution was enclosed with the letter, written carefully in Hicks's block handwriting. Webb checked it that afternoon, then again that evening, and then showed it to 2 colleagues the next morning. The proof was correct. More than that, it was elegant. It used an approach none of them had considered, a way of seeing the problem that simplified what they had been making far too complex. Whoever had written it understood mathematics far beyond simple calculation. This was true intuition, the rare kind that could not be taught, only discovered in minds able to see the hidden structure behind numbers and forces. The following week, Webb traveled to Boston's South End, carrying a notebook, a pencil, and a skepticism that was already beginning to weaken, before explaining what happened when he found Lydia Johnson and her mother in their boarding house room. "I want to ask you something. If stories of hidden brilliance that challenge who we think deserves to be called a genius fascinate you, subscribe to this channel and leave a comment about which historical mystery you want us to explore next. I'm building something meaningful here, a community that refuses to let these voices remain unheard." Now let me tell you what Professor Webb discovered in that freezing boarding house, and why it would eventually destroy everything he believed about the human mind. In 1897, Boston's South End was where the city placed the people it needed, but preferred not to see. Irish immigrants lived packed into tenements alongside freed slaves and their children. They worked the jobs that kept the city alive while living in conditions that kept them invisible. The boarding house, where Lydia lived with her mother, Clara, stood on a narrow street that never received direct sunlight. The building rose 4 stories high, its bricks stained by water and its shutters broken. The stairwells smelled of cold smoke and boiled cabbage, a smell that never seemed to fade. Webb climbed to the 3rd floor, his expensive coat drawing suspicious looks from residents who recognized someone who did not belong to their world. He found the room number Hicks had given him and knocked, painfully aware of how improper this visit was. A white professor, unmarried, calling on a colored woman and her child in a boarding house, would raise questions if the institute's trustees found out. But curiosity had overpowered caution, that dangerous urge that drives scientists into places they are told to avoid. The woman who opened the door appeared to be about 35. Her face was worn by years of hard labor and constant worry. She wore a plain gray dress, carefully patched at the elbows, and her hair was wrapped in a faded blue cloth. When she saw Webb, fear flashed across her face before she hid it behind a practiced calm, the kind colored people used when facing white authority. "Ma'am, I'm Professor Harrison Webb from MIT. I'm looking for Mrs. Lydia Johnson." "I'm Lydia Johnson, sir." Her voice was quiet, braced for bad news, because that was usually what such visits brought. "Is your daughter here? Miss Lydia Johnson?" Lydia's hand tightened on the doorframe. "What is this about? Is she in trouble?" "Sir, if she did something wrong at the Institute, I promise she won't go back. I told her to stay in the storage room while I clean, not to touch anything. But sometimes she wanders. Children get curious, it won't happen again. She's not in trouble, Mrs. Johnson, quite the opposite. I need to speak with her about something she did." Those words drained the remaining color from Lydia's face. She stepped back and opened the door wider, resigned to whatever was coming. The room was small, perhaps 12 feet square, with a single window facing a brick wall. A narrow bed stood against one wall. A small table with two mismatched chairs sat in the center. In one corner, a pile of blankets on the floor showed where the child slept. The room was spotless. The poverty was absolute, but carried with dignity. A colored girl sat at the table, focused on something in her lap. She was small for 13, thin in a way that spoke of missed meals so her mother could eat. Her skin was dark brown, her hair braided tightly against her head, her dress a faded calico that had been let out again and again as she grew. When she looked up at Webb, he saw her eyes, wide and dark, holding something that made him uneasy. They seemed to look at him and through him at the same time, as if calculating something he could not see. "Lydia, this is Professor Webb from MIT. He wants to talk to you." Lydia's voice carried a warning beneath the words. "Be respectful. Be small. Do not give them reasons." "Good afternoon, sir," Lydia said softly. She stood and set aside what she had been holding, a piece of newspaper she had been studying. Webb leaned closer. The page showed an advertisement for farming equipment, but the margins were filled with tiny mathematical symbols and numbers written so small they were barely readable. "Miss Johnson, I want to ask you about something that happened last Tuesday night at the Institute. Mr. Hicks found you in one of our laboratories. Do you remember?" Lydia lowered her eyes. "Yes, sir. I'm sorry, sir. I know I shouldn't have been there." "What were you doing?" "I was looking at the blackboard, sir, the one with the bridge equations." "Why?" She looked confused by the question. "Because they were wrong, sir. The professors made a mistake in the third step, and everything after that was wrong because of it. It was like a building with a broken foundation. I could see it would fall." Webb felt a chill unrelated to the cold. "You could say, the error?" "Yes, sir. Can you explain it?" Lydia glanced at her mother. Lydia gave a small nod, though she clearly had no idea what was coming. "They treated the wind force as if it came from one direction," Lydia said. "But wind doesn't work like that. It twists and changes. You can't use a simple vector. You have to account for rotation and time changes. I've watched the wind move through the city. It's complex." She spoke as if she were describing something plainly visible. Webb took out his notebook. "Miss Johnson, I'm going to write some problems. I want you to look at them and tell me if you can solve them." For the next 2 hours in that freezing room, Webb carried out what would become one of the most important intellectual examinations of the 19th century. He began with simple arithmetic. Lydia solved each problem instantly. He moved to algebra, geometry, trigonometry. She answered without hesitation, often before he finished writing. Her methods were unusual but flawless. He then moved into advanced mathematics, calculus, differential equations, and complex theoretical problems his graduate students struggled with. Lydia never slowed. She looked at each problem as if she were seeing beyond the symbols and then gave the answer. When asked how she saw it, she drew strange diagrams, visual maps of mathematical relationships that were both unfamiliar and perfectly logical. "Where did you learn this?" Webb asked after she solved a difficult problem in fluid dynamics. "I didn't learn it, sir. I just see it." "What do you mean?" "When I look at numbers, I see shapes and patterns. Mathematics isn't symbols to me. It's like architecture in my id. I see how things fit together, how forces balance. With the bridge problem, I could see the bridge and the forces acting on it. It made no sense, and yet it made perfect sense. Webb had heard of savants who could calculate quickly without understanding. But Lydia understood everything. She explained her reasoning. She applied it to new problems. This was true genius, appearing in a colored girl living in poverty, daughter of a cleaning woman. "How do you know physics and engineering?" Webb asked. "From watching, sir. Mama cleans at MIT 5 nights a week. I go with her. I'm supposed to stay in the supply closet, but sometimes I walk around. I look at blackboards, books, machines. I see the math under everything. The world is made of numbers and forces." Clara, standing silently, finally spoke. "Is she wrong in the head, Professor? People say she's strange." Webb looked at a woman who feared her daughter's brilliance was an illness. "Mrs. Johnson, your daughter is extraordinary. She has abilities I have never seen." Tears filled Clara's eyes. "Is that good or bad, sir? In a world built on the belief that colored people were inferior, what did such a child mean?" "I don't know," Webb said honestly, "but I want to understand it. Will it help her?" Clara asked. "Will it give her a better life?" Webb could not promise. "I don't know, but I will do everything I can to protect her." "I want to learn, Mama," Lydia said simply. "I can see the math, but there's more I don't know yet." How could anyone deny that? Clara agreed, with one warning. If Lydia was harmed, they would disappear. Within weeks, leading mathematicians confirmed Lydia's abilities. She wasn't copying, she was creating. By February, whispers spread through academic circles, and with those whispers came the question, what do we do with her? MIT's trustees met in emergency session. A secret arrangement was made. Lydia would study at night, unseen, unacknowledged. She would learn but never officially exist. She learned at an impossible speed. She found errors in Newton, suggested changes to Maxwell, and remained hidden. But secrets do not last. Rumors spread. A racial theorist named Dr. Marcus Thorne became obsessed with destroying the truth she represented. An examination was arranged. Lydia faced a panel of white men determined to test, doubt, and control her. She answered every problem. She exposed errors. She explained truth with calm clarity. When Thorne turned to skull measurements, Webb knew the danger. Lydia endured it in silence. When it was over, Thorne studied his notes in frustration, unable to reconcile the numbers with his beliefs. The measurements fall within normal limits for her age and sex. Her cranial capacity appears sufficient, although of course we cannot determine brain weight without dissection. The offhand way he mentioned dissection, as if Lydia were already a body prepared for study, made Webb's blood turn cold. "That will not be necessary," he said sharply. "We are examining a living child, not preparing a cadaver for autopsy. Obviously, we cannot dissect a living subject," Thorne replied with forced patience. "But it does restrict our ability to draw firm conclusions about the physical source of her supposed abilities." "There is nothing supposed about them," Webb said. "You spent 5 hours watching her solve problems most people couldn't solve, even with weeks of study. At what point does the evidence become enough?" "Evidence is meaningless without a proper theoretical framework," Thorne replied. "Yes, the girl can perform mathematical operations. That is documented. But what does it mean? Is this real intelligence or a form of savant syndrome, an isolated skill disconnected from broader reasoning ability? Is this an isolated case or proof of larger patterns we've failed to notice? Can these abilities be passed on to offspring, or are they a genetic abnormality? These are the questions that matter scientifically. All of those questions assume she's here to be examined like a laboratory sample instead of educated like a human being with extraordinary gifts. She's a Negro," Thorne said bluntly. "Her education or lack of it is not my concern. My concern is understanding what her case means for our theories of racial intelligence." There it was, stated plainly. To Thorne, Lydia was not a person. She was data, a puzzle to be solved, a threat to be explained away or forced into existing frameworks that preserve the racial hierarchy. Hamilton spoke carefully. "Dr. Thorne, I think we need to recognize that this examination has demonstrated truly remarkable abilities. The question now is what we do with that knowledge. We study her further, Thorne said immediately. Extended testing, repeated examinations by multiple researchers, documentation of her development over time. This is too important to settle in a single day. You want to turn her into a permanent research subject, Webb said. I want to pursue proper scientific inquiry. Surely you understand this case, Rick. Wire's thorough study. What I understand is that you want to lock a 13-year-old girl in a laboratory and test her until you either explain away her abilities or she collapses under the pressure. Don't be dramatic. We are not discussing anything harmful. Simple observation and testing. Simple observation that would mean removing her from her home, separating her from her mother, and making her entire life about satisfying your curiosity. The argument escalated. Voices rose. The 5 men talked over one another, and in the center of it all, Lydia stood silently, listening to them argue about her future, as if she weren't there, as if she had no right to decide anything about her own life. Finally, she spoke. Her voice cut through the noise with unexpected strength. "Excuse me, sir." They fell silent, surprised that she had spoken without being invited. "I have a question. This is not the time," Thorne began. "When is the time, sir?" Lydia asked. "You have examined me for 7 hours. You tested my mathematics, measured my head, discussed what it means that I can do what I can do. But no one has asked me what I want." "What you want is irrelevant," Thorne said. "You are a minor, and more importantly, you cannot understand the scientific importance of your own case." "I cannot understand," Lydia said quietly. "I understand mathematics that took you years to learn. I see patterns and relationships that took humanity thousands of years to discover. I taught myself to read and write because I needed language to understand the mathematics in my head. I may be 13 and colored and female, but I am not ignorant about my own life. So I will ask again. Does anyone care what I want?" Hamilton cleared his throat. "What do you want, Miss Johnson?" "I want to learn. I want books and teachers and problems I haven't seen yet. I want to understand all the mathematics I can see, but don't yet have names for. I want to use what I can do to build things, to solve real problems, to create something that matters. I do not want to be locked in a room being measured and tested like an animal that learned a trick. That is not what scientific research is," Thorne began. "That is exactly what it is, sir," Lydia said. "You do not see me as a person. You see me as evidence for or against your theories, and I understand why. If I am real, if I am truly this intelligent, then everything you have written about racial inferiority is wrong. All those measurements, all those conclusions, all the laws and policies built on your research, they are built on lies. That is why you are angry, not because you doubt what I can do, but because you cannot afford to believe it." The silence that followed was complete. A 13-year-old Negro girl had just spoken the truth at the center of the matter with perfect clarity, and no one had an answer ready. Thorne's face turned dark with rage, his hands trembling slightly. When he spoke, his voice was dangerously calm. "You have no idea what you are talking about." "I understand more than you think," Lydia replied. "I understand that you are afraid. I understand that admitting I am right would destroy your reputation. I understand that powerful men do not like being proven wrong by powerless girls, but I also understand mathematics. And mathematics teaches that truth does not care about your feelings. Either my proof is correct or it is not. Either my answers are right or they are wrong. You cannot change mathematics to make yourself comfortable. You can only accept it or lie about it." Webb watched Thorne's expression and recognized it instantly. This was not the face of a man accepting defeat. This was the face of a man deciding how to remove a threat. "Gentlemen," Thorne said smoothly, "I propose we conclude this examination. We have enough information to prepare preliminary reports. I suggest we reconvene in 1 month to discuss our findings." It was a calculated retreat, a way to escape without conceding anything. The panel agreed, relieved to end the tension. As they gathered their papers, Thorne approached Webb with a thin smile. Professor Webb, I trust you understand that additional security measures will be necessary. The girl's location must remain confidential while we complete our assessment. Security from what? From exploitation, from premature publicity, from those who might use her for political purposes before scientific consensus is reached. I will recommend to MIT's board that access to her be tightly restricted. It sounded reasonable. It sounded protective. But Webb heard the real meaning. Thorne wanted control. Control over who saw Lydia, who studied her, and how her story would be told. When Webb left the room, he found Clara waiting, fear etched into her face after hours of helpless waiting. Is she all right? Physically, yes. But Clara, we need to talk, not here. Somewhere private. They collected Lydia, who came out looking exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical effort. Webb led them to his office, locked the door, and told them what he believed was coming. Dr. Thorne is going to try to take control of this. He will argue that Lydia needs to be placed in a controlled research environment, that she is too important to be left with her family. And I don't know if I can stop him. Then we run, Clara said instantly. We leave Boston tonight. Where would you go? Thorne has connections everywhere. If he declares you fugitives, he can have people searching in every city. So what are you saying? Clara snapped. That we hand my daughter over to be studied like an insect? No. I'm saying we need to be strategic. We document everything. We build support from researchers who recognize Lydia's abilities and oppose treating her like a specimen. If we must, we go public. We make enough noise that Thorne cannot simply erase her. And if that fails, then you run and I will help you. Money, contacts, whatever you need. But let us try the official path first. Webb knew it was optimistic. But what was the alternative? Tell a mother and child to disappear into a world that offered no safety for brilliant colored girls who challenged everything society believed about who mattered. Lydia spoke quietly. Professor Webb, how long do we have? I don't know. Days, maybe a week. Then I need to learn as much as I can. If they take me somewhere I cannot study, if they lock me away, I want my mind to be full. I want to know enough that even if they silence me, the mathematics stays inside me where they cannot take it. Can you teach me every day until whatever happens, happens? Webb looked at her and understood she already knew she was a target. Yes, he said. Every day. I will teach you everything I know. And so began the most intense teaching of Webb's life. For 12 days he taught Lydia 6 to 8 hours a day, compressing years of mathematics, physics, and engineering into stolen time. She absorbed it all, making connections he had never imagined, asking questions that revealed frightening depth. But beneath the intellectual wonder, they all felt the clock ticking. On May 28, 1897, Thorne made his move. Webb arrived at the boarding house to find it surrounded by police. Clara was being restrained, screaming for her daughter. Lydia was being forced into a closed carriage by men in dark coats, her hands bound, her face frozen in shock. Webb demanded answers. An officer showed him papers signed by a judge declaring Lydia a ward of the state, taken into custody for her own welfare. The reason given was that her mother was unfit to care for a child with special medical needs. The needs were never defined. Where are you taking her? Webb shouted. To a private medical facility where she will receive appropriate care, one man replied calmly. She will be evaluated by specialists. Kept safe. Safe from what? Clara screamed. The carriage door closed. As it pulled away, Lydia looked back. In her eyes, Webb saw not fear or anger, but understanding. She knew this was how it was meant to end. But it was not the end. And what Thorne planned for Lydia was far worse than isolation. What followed would force Webb to destroy his career, defy institutions, and decide whether saving one brilliant child was worth burning his entire life to the ground. Because to him, I am not a person. I am a specimen. And specimens exist to be studied no matter what it costs them. Harrison pulled her into a tight embrace, feeling her thin body shaking against him. He will never touch you again. I promise you that. We are taking you somewhere he can never reach. You will be free to learn and grow and become whatever you are meant to become. And he will spend the rest of his life knowing that the proof that destroyed his beliefs escaped him forever. Do you think he will stop looking for me? I think he will try to find you. But my dear, the world is vast and we are going to hide you so completely inside it that Dr. Marcus Thorne will search until the end of his life and never succeed. You will become a rumor, a legend, the brilliant girl who vanished, the one who escaped, and that will haunt him forever. For the first time since her rescue, Lydia smiled. It was a small but fierce smile, the kind that showed that despite everything they had done to her, despite the weeks of isolation, testing, and fear, they had not broken what truly mattered. Her mind was still her own, her brilliance still burned inside her, and now she would have the chance to discover who she could become when given freedom. Instead of captivity, learning instead of examination, dignity instead of being treated like an object. But the question that haunted all of them as they prepared for the final journey to Canada was whether escape alone was enough, whether one girl's freedom meant anything if the system that had tried to destroy her still remained, ready to do the same thing to the next brilliant child who threatened the comfortable lies holding racial hierarchy in place. And it is here, at this moment of successful escape and uncertain future, that we must pause again. They crossed into Canada on July 2, 1897, using forged papers that identified them as the Miller family. John Miller, a widowed schoolteacher from Vermont, his sister Clara Miller, and her daughter Sarah Miller, traveling to Toronto to accept a teaching position. The border guards barely looked at them, just 3 more Americans among thousands crossing the border for work, opportunity, or reasons they did not care to explain. And just like that, Professor Harrison Webb ceased to exist. John Miller, with his modest savings, heavy conscience, and unshakable determination to finish what he had started, took his place. Toronto in 1897 was a city shaped by migration. Thousands of freed slaves and their descendants had moved north over the years, forming communities that understood the need to protect those fleeing injustice in the United States. The Millers, as they now called themselves, found rooms in one such community in a boarding house run by a woman named Margaret Hawthorne, whose parents had escaped slavery through the Underground Railroad 50 years earlier. Margaret asked no questions. She demanded no explanations for their careful avoidance of details about where they came from or why they had left. She had seen enough refugees to recognize the signs. People who startled at unexpected knocks, who read newspapers closely for stories about fugitives and extradition, who kept bags packed near the door in case they had to run again. She gave them privacy, quiet support, and connections to people who might help. The first months were about survival and adjustment. Harrison, now John, found work tutoring the children of wealthy Toronto families, using his real mathematical skill while carefully avoiding any mention of MIT or his academic past. The pay was modest but enough. Clara found work as a seamstress, leaving behind the exhausting cleaning jobs that had worn her down for years, and Lydia, now Sarah, slowly began to recover from the trauma of Brightwater. The physical healing came first: regular meals, rest, freedom from constant testing and confinement. She gained weight, her face filled out, color returned to her skin, but the emotional recovery took much longer. She had nightmares that left her screaming, waking the entire boarding house. She could not tolerate locked doors. She panicked if left alone in a closed room. She jumped at footsteps in hallways, certain guards were coming for her, and she could not do mathematics. This was the most frightening symptom of all. When Harrison tried to resume her education, showing her problems she once would have solved, instantly, she stared at the page in panic. Her breathing quickened, her hands shook. Mathematics, once her refuge, the one thing that had made sense in a chaotic world, had been poisoned by association with Thorne's examinations. Every equation reminded her of Brightwater. Every calculation brought back the memory of being forced to perform to prove her worth as a specimen. "I cannot see it anymore," she told Harrison one evening, 3 months after their escape, tears running down her face. "The shapes, the patterns, the way numbers used to fit together in my head. It's like there's fog everywhere. I only see symbols now, not the structure underneath. He broke something in me. Dr. Thorne broke the part of my mind that made me special. You are still special, Lydia. Your mind is still extraordinary. You are traumatized. That is normal after what you survived. But what if it never comes back? What if it's gone forever? Then what was the point? We ran. You gave up everything. Mama lost her home, all to save a girl who isn't even smart anymore. Harrison grabbed her shoulders and made her look at him. Listen to me carefully. Your worth as a human being has nothing to do with mathematics. Nothing. You matter because you exist, because you are a person with thoughts, feelings, and dignity. Not because you can solve equations faster than anyone else. Even if you never do advanced mathematics again, your life still matters. Do you understand? She wanted to believe him, but her whole life she had been taught that her value came from being exceptional, that without mathematics she was just another colored girl in a world that had no place for colored girls. The breakthrough came in October, 4 months after their escape. Lydia was walking through Toronto's market district with her mother when she suddenly stopped, staring at a construction site where workers were building a new commercial structure. Clara, used to her daughter's strange focus, waited quietly. "Mama," Lydia said slowly, "that beam they're placing will fail. The angle is wrong for how the weight is distributed." "How can you tell, baby?" "Because," Lydia paused, her hand tracing invisible lines in the air, "because I can see the forces again, the mathematics. It's coming back. Mama, it's coming back," she cried, but this time with relief and joy. The fog was lifting. The patterns she feared were gone forever were still there, buried under trauma, waiting for safety and time. The recovery was not instant. There were bad days, days when Brightwater overwhelmed everything. But slowly, steadily, her abilities returned. Harrison resumed teaching her carefully, always letting her set the pace. And something remarkable happened. As Lydia healed, her abilities did not just return, they grew. The time away from mathematics had changed how her mind worked. She approached problems with new creativity, finding solutions that were simpler, deeper, more intuitive. By her 14th birthday in April 1898, she was working on problems Harrison himself struggled to understand. "I need to find you better teachers," he admitted one evening. "You've surpassed me." "That's impossible," Lydia said. "No university will teach a 14-year-old colored girl, not officially. But there may be other ways." And so began the quiet education that followed, the hidden collaboration, the brilliance that history nearly lost.